Kamna Maori, everyone. I'm Katerina Teaiwa here at the Australian National University. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's a very hectic day, very hectic week. There's a lot going on in this world, but we're very excited to have all of you with us today for our film launch. Before we begin, I'm going to hand it over to my director, the director of the School of Culture, History and Language, Professor Simon Haberly, to say a few words in acknowledgement of country before we go into our program this afternoon. If it is indeed afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks so much, Kati, and welcome everybody. It's a beautiful day in Canberra, as you can see behind me. Not sure whether that's the case wherever you are, but so wonderful to see everybody here and to be part of this really exciting and I think very important film launch and an ongoing discussion. But I'd just really like to, at the outset, acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands in which we meet, and many of you are across the globe perhaps, but here in Canberra, we're on Ngunnawal country, and it's a real privilege to be here. This is land that was never ceded, but it's obviously changed quite a lot, as you can see from my background, but connections to that country from elders and emerging elders and people of this region are very strong and remain strong. And we acknowledge that and welcome any First Nations peoples that might be joining us here today as well. So it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, for us all to gather. And there's a really high number of registrants to this event, and wow, what a great acknowledgement of the work that's been done by Kati and the whole team, who you'll meet in a minute. But yeah, I'd just like to really thank and celebrate that work and acknowledge that here in our School of Culture, History and Language, a name like that suggests we should be focusing on decolonising the Academy and addressing those issues, and we certainly will be from now on. So really looking forward to today, and I'll hand it back to Kati.
Vinaka Korapa Simon, for your acknowledgement and giving a bit of the context of our school. As I said earlier, Kamna Maori, Nisambula Vinaka, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us towards the end of what has been quite an extraordinary year, especially if you're Indigenous, if you're Black, if you're displaced, if you care at all about historical and structural injustices, climate change, COVID-19, and for some of us, the outcome of the current American election. So I know some of you will be checking your phones in between various bits of this event, and I fully understand. But it's been an extraordinary, exhausting, but also inspiring year for all of us. And I know for many of you too. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Katerina Teaiwa. I'm an associate professor of Pacific Studies here at the Australian National University. I am of Banabin and Tabitawayan descent from Kiribati. I'm also of African American descent. I was born and raised in Fiji. I'm a scholar, a teacher, an artist who has worked across many forms, including dance, film, and the visual arts. As Simon mentioned, many of us are coming to you from unceded Aboriginal, Ngunnawal and Ngambri lands here in Canberra. For those of you who might be outside Australia, we're in the Australian Capital Territory. It is the capital of this country. You'll get to see some of our beautiful place and our campus in the film. But we pay respects to all the ancestors, spirits, elders, and communities of this land on which we are highly privileged to live and work. And we extend those respects to all Indigenous viewers joining us for this film launch. Now we will have a discussion and Q&A after the film, and the Q&A will be managed through the Q&A function. There's also a chat function. So just be mindful of that when we get to that part of the program. We will also be sending you the link for the film so that you can watch it yourself on your computer in order to get the best quality and the best experience of our short film. Before we do that, however, I would like to introduce some of the participants of this launch to you. I'll have them introduce themselves. So the film emerges out of a series of workshops and a public forum. They were called Indigenous Remix and Decolonizing the Academy. And this brought together scholars, artists, and activists from Australia and Oceania. We were funded and supported by the wonderful leadership in our school at the ANU. You'll see some of the lovely faces of the people involved in the film, and there were a few who are you won't see in the film, but who are very active behind the scenes. And I want to acknowledge the wonderful team who's been running around and doing all kinds of work to make this happen. At these events, we talked about what it's like to be Indigenous in our institutional spaces, how being Indigenous impacts our teaching, our research, our outreach, our admin and service, all the work that we do, and how we might build solidarities and other alliances between First Nations and Indigenous staff of all the diverse backgrounds that we come from, as well as non-Indigenous allies. So in terms of introductions, I'm going to start with a few of the brilliant people who joined us in Canberra last year, and then move to the team behind the workshop's website. There's a website that's going to host the film. And as I said before, we'll be providing the YouTube link for you so that you can watch it on your own when we give everyone the signal. So I'd like to start with my wonderful sisters from the Unbound Collective, joining us from Flinders University in Adelaide. And I'm going to let the wonderful and brilliant Natalie Harkin and Ali Baker introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Harkin. I'm an Arunga woman, born and raised and living on the beautiful lands of the Kaurna people, beautiful Kaurna country. And I'm a poet. I'm a part of the Unbound Collective with Ali and our two sisters who cannot be here, but were invited into this discussion as well, Simone Ulalkatur and Faye Roses Blanche. I don't think I need to say any more than that for now. So thank you. And thanks so much, Katerina, for inviting us into this. And I also acknowledge all the various countries that you're all from and all your elders past, present and future. And our ancestors are right here with us. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Ali Gumillya Baker and my family's from the west coast of South Australia. We're Merning from the Nullarbor. We're sitting, Natalie and I are sitting in Tandanyanga, which is like the centre of Adelaide CBD on Kaurna country, and I want to acknowledge everyone and where you all are across the beautiful earth.
Thank you so much, Bianca, Ali, and Natalie. We're going to move now to our colleague, the wonderful Emalani Case, who's joining us from Wellington in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and she'll tell us a bit more about her background.
Aloha mai kākou. I'm Emalani Case, and as Kati said, I'm zooming in from Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington, Aotearoa. I'm originally from Hawaii, though. So I'm a Kanaka Maoli, Hawaiian woman, and that's where my ancestry comes from, but am really privileged now to live here on Indigenous land of Tangata Whenua in Aotearoa. And I'm really happy to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Mahalo, Emalani. Thank you so much for joining us from Wellington. I'd now like members of the team at the ANU who have been behind the workshops, the public forums that were associated with the film that you're going to be seeing, the website that's going to host the film, and the filmmakers, the film editors and film directors, our two wonderful, highly talented filmmakers. I'd like all of them to introduce themselves, starting with Associate Professor Janelle Stevenson, my wonderful colleague here in the School of Culture, History and Language.
Thanks, Kati. Sorry, I'm not sure where the microphone is in this room. Yes, I'm an academic here at the ANU in the School of Culture, History and Language. I'm descended from white colonists of this land, and but I'm very privileged to live and work here on beautiful Ngunnawal and Ngambri land. I'm actually a scientist, and my specialty is in the deep time in this country, and I work extensively with Indigenous communities around the country.
Thank you so much, Janelle. Can we hear from Bianca?
Sure. Hi, my name is Bianca Hennessey. I'm a PhD candidate at the School of Culture, History and Language in Pacific Studies, working with Katerina, and really had a great time helping out with this project. Like Janelle, I descend from white settlers, grew up on Awabakal land in Newcastle, but Canberra, Ngunnawal and Ngambri country is now home. It's lovely to see you all here.
Wonderful, thank you, Bianca. Can we move now to Trish Tupou?
Malolele. Hi everyone. I'm also a PhD student here at Australia National University, but I grew up in Kirikiriroa, which is in Tainui land in Aotearoa, and I'm new to the ANU and I'm new to this project. I have Tongan, Irish and Bohemian ancestry. And si Otaofa to Mona and Daniel, who I see are zooming in from Auckland University. Nice to see you on here, and I will be sharing more about the dialogue section of the website later on. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Trish. And finally to our wonderful film editors, Akil, Ahamat, and Talei Mangioni.
Hi everyone, Bulavinaka. My name's Talei Luscia Mangioni, and I'm a PhD student at CHL at the ANU, working with Katerina, and yes, I'm one of the filmmakers along with Akil. We're coming to you today from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, both the place that I grew up and was raised on, so it's a very special land to me. I'll just pass it on over to Akil now.
Hi, I'm Akil Ahamat. I'm a Sri Lankan Malay artist and filmmaker. And yeah, it was a real privilege to work in the film. Hope you like it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Akil and Talei. And I should say in the background, we have Sarah and Morgan, who are part of our admin team, doing all the things that need to be done in the back. So thank you so much. I think you can see them. They're waving from our offices. They've been doing a lot of hard work. So we're so grateful to this whole wonderful team and all our participants for bringing us together. And here we go with the launch of this film. So we are now going to share the link to everyone. Let us know if you all can see that. And I would suggest, the film is about just over 17 minutes long. So I would suggest everyone go view the film and come back no more than 20 minutes from now so that we can go and flow straight into our discussion with Ali and Natalie and Emalani and Akil and Talei. So hopefully you can all see the film link. It's on YouTube, so you should all be able to view it well on your computers. Let us know if there are any problems or challenges around that, but let's all go view the film. We hope you like it, and then we can have a discussion about it. Vinaka, kamrapa.
I'd rather do this.
For anyone just joining, please check the chat for the link. Thank you. Maori, everyone. I think some of you have finished up the film, but we'll give others another minute to finish up watching it on the YouTube link. It's great to see some of the feedback so far. Some of us had pretty mixed feelings about showing our exercise session at the end of the film, but one of the things we discovered really quickly through our gathering and through our sharing and through our discussions about decolonizing the academy was that we had to attend to our health and well-being in order to do the work. Ooh, I don't know why I'm getting emotional. In order to do the work that we do. Sorry about that. Who would have thought talking about the exercise session at the end of the film would be so emotional? But, you know, part of being Indigenous in the academy is dealing with a lot of health and well-being issues. So I'd like to open it up to a discussion of the many things that came out of the workshop, came out of the forum, and came out of the film as well. Because as I mentioned, you know, we came to talk about teaching and research and outreach and trans-Indigenous solidarity, and quickly discovered that we had to build kinship. And we had to be pretty honest in our sharing with each other in order to build that trust and that solidarity. So I'd like to invite Ali and Natalie and Emalani to have a bit of a reflection on, you know, what we experienced then in 2019, and then the heck of a year that we've had between then and now, when it's not that the issues have changed, but they've become amplified and they've become intensified by climate change, by bushfires, by hurricanes and cyclones and volcanic eruptions and earthquakes and Black Lives Matter, and the ongoing fight for justice and for the sovereignty and self-determination of Indigenous peoples. The issues are still there. The environment has shifted slightly, but I'd like to invite my amazing sisters to have a reflection about this, starting with Ali and Natalie.
Thank you, Katerina. I too feel emotional, and I think reflecting on the incredible gathering that we were so lucky to attend on Ngunnawal country, and listening to the kind of the work that we were doing there and the discussions that we were having, and thinking about everything that's happened this year. I know I've shared with you before this about the kind of the incredible emotion of being in this kind of Zoom format or online format for teaching, and having to teach about race, but also having the pressure of the universities, which are in free fall across the country, putting extra pressure sometimes on our Indigenous bodies, and the kind of the emotional toll of that. So yeah, reflecting on it, I mean, since between then and now, I got unwell. I had to take some time out of the university, but I'm definitely back in the space. And for us, we were just discussing, you know, for us, a lot of the issues that we were discussing in 2019 in the video are still very present and amplified as you described. And I was thinking about the beautiful old trees that we saw on the ANU campus with Uncle Wally, and about the incredibly, the Jawarang trees and the old trees that, you know, we get to see when we go to our place, which is very, you know, built up, and lots of roads where they've been cutting things down. And so, you know, reflecting on all of these ideas of our earth is really important. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think we bring those reflections into our daily life at the university too. We're not divorced from that. So we don't clock off from the institution, go home and deal with it all. It's just with us 100%. So our students and our colleagues get to see it all and feel it all with us. But yeah, I guess since having that wonderful gathering with you all, where the focus was very much on health and well-being and how to stay strong and connected and to be able to breathe in institutions which sometimes feel like they're literally choking you with the weight of the knowledge that is continually oppressing. It does feel, I think, what Alice Tupou Somerville started off the film, and congratulations Akil and Talei, the film's wonderful. I think Alice said, you know, there's this we're constantly drawn in, this responsiveness, it's like crisis mode all the time, and it does feel like we're in this constant state of fight or flight. And it feels like in the last couple of years since 2019, it's even ramped up more with the assault on the humanities, certainly in the Australian context, and Indigenous studies and the humanities in particular. And yeah, and I guess and there's been so much restructuring in the institutions where I think we've seen such constriction and constraint on what we're able to do, but also our teams have diminished in Indigenous studies. We don't feel the same sense of succession or capacity building, which is really required because, you know, we're kind of middle-aged and, you know, on the edge. You know, Faye certainly talks about retirement. It's really important that she has those conversations now. And for us as an Unbound collective, we can see so much work still to be done, but not a lot of recognition in the institution around capacity building to continue it into the future. So I think Alice's poem in particular as well was incredible, you know, wanting to, what did she say, all those, you know, may she run out of ideas before she runs out of time, and see scores of Indigenous scholars write hundreds of Indigenous books asking thousands of Indigenous questions. And I think that's a really beautiful sentiment. We all want that. And it's still a real struggle in the space to see that it's, you know, still not happening.
Thank you so much, Nat and Ali. I'm so glad you highlighted Alice's words. That poem really struck me, and I think contributed to just my experience of the film, you know, because for many of us, it's not just a job. It's not just a job or a career. Emalani, your reflections.
First of all, thank you. It's just such an honor. Like watching it back, I just was sort of transported back to that time that I spent with all of you, and how healing that was for me as an early career academic, someone who still feels like I'm navigating this space and trying to figure things out. That time last year when we were all together, it was a real big lesson for me to take care of myself, to say no, that saying no to things is really powerful. It was a reminder to be more balanced, to be aware of when I'm not in balance, when I'm doing too much, when I'm working too much. And so watching the film back was just, it was beautiful to kind of think about the networks and the friendships that we created, and that knowing when we came together that we're not doing this alone, even though we might be at our separate institutions, we're all in this together. And that helps to lessen the load a little bit and lessen the weight of it all. As I was watching too, I just kept thinking about how the issues that we talked about in the film, they're still here. Of course, they haven't gone away, but as you said earlier, 2020 and the realities of 2020 have seemed to just put a magnifying glass on everything, where now everything just seems amplified, and the issues we face are even more pressing. Something that I found for myself as an Indigenous academic teaching in Pacific Studies is I feel an even larger sense of urgency, even more responsibility to my students. And as horrible as the year has been, I feel like the fire in me is even larger to do more for my students. It's not just about teaching them when they walk into the classroom, but supplying them with what they need to be able to meet the demands and the realities and the atrocities of their lives today. Just recently, I finished teaching a class on history in Polynesia, and my goal was to arm them with history so they knew that history was theirs, so that they knew history was something they could use to help them unpack why they were living in the realities they're living in right now, why Pacific and Maori communities suffer disproportionately, why it was okay for the United States to hold war games in Hawaii during a global pandemic, why we have to go through these things. So it's not just about teaching history and teaching content, but giving them tools to survive as Indigenous people. And if anything, the film reminds me of the huge responsibility that we have as Indigenous academics to our students and to our larger communities, but also reminds me of how we have to be so aware of taking care of self, finding those moments of joy to exercise and dance, even if we think we might look ridiculous, because our people depend on that as well. They need that fire, but they need us to be healthy and happy at the same time. So yeah, just a huge thanks to all of you, and to all of the people who I was able to share space and time with last year, and a special shout out again to Alice for that poem that always makes me cry when I hear it. Gosh, there's such power in her words and in that creative practice. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Mahalo. Alice is actually with us. I know she's there in the chat. So Alice has been following along from Aotearoa. Alice is on annual leave, I believe. So I didn't want to, put the burden on her of having to speak. But as you can see, Alice, we have all quoted you. So, thank you so much for what you shared with us. The other things that, inspired me from the film, from our colleagues who weren't able to join us, were from Leah, where she was talking about how our questions come from different places. Our questions, when it comes to research or pedagogical questions, our questions come from different places. So she was talking about how we're not just Indigenous versions of white or settler colonial researchers and their approaches. We can do things differently in our own way. And the other person who couldn't join us, Futuru Tsai from Taiwan, I loved what he said in terms of, this tug between the body and the mind. And he had these amazing quotes about, let your body go ahead, let your mouth come behind. These are just like perfect quotes about the tensions between knowing and being and doing and talking, which is what academics are often expected to do. Thank you so much to the three of you for sharing your reflections. Really appreciate it. I wonder if we could hear from Akil and Talei and their experiences of doing the filming and editing the film and some of the choices they had to make, because there was a lot of footage There was a lot of interview content, which I'm still hoping that we can put out through our website, because each of our participants had some wonderful things to say, and you only got a small slice of that in this particular edit. So it would be wonderful to hear some reflections from Akil and Talei, who were really worked so hard that week.
Thanks everyone for your reflections. Yeah, it makes me really emotional to yeah, hear your feedback and know that people enjoyed the film. Yeah, I guess I just echo Emalani in a way, like being able to hold that intimate and vulnerable space with people, especially in terms of, for us, I mean, we were able to do it through the interviews. So the interviews were set aside from the main workshops and well-being activities. So like in a way we were there, but we were also not there and having a completely different experience, you know, with everyone. Most of the interviews we did for about half an hour or an hour. Some were group interviews, like with the Unbound Collective, which was amazing. And some were, you know, one-on-one interviews with the other scholars and artists and activists. But yeah, it was a real honor as a PhD student who has pretty minimal experience of the academy. I mean, before my PhD in my undergrad, I had absolutely no respect for the academy. So I, you know, was kind of away from it as much as possible. But yeah, as someone, you know, and I guess as well, racisms, and also just thinking, oh, sorry, my internet's on. Yeah, I guess in terms of the long view, just like this has made me think that this is just an ongoing battle that so many generations before me have struggled with and struggled against. And yeah, just to locate myself within that genealogy is like an honor, and to listen to everyone's different perspectives from across the region, and also make me reflect on how I can be of service to Indigenous peoples on this country. As a Pacific Islander, I thought that was really, yeah, invaluable experience. And then I think Akil's going to talk about the editing of the film, which took a long time as well.
Yeah, I mean, between the interviews and filming all of the panels and the dinner at what's that restaurant with the whole pig?
Oh, the Tongan restaurant. Yeah. Kingdom 5. Yeah.
Kingdom 5.
We love that.
And yeah, like all of the time spent together, like that was really a lot of footage. And we could have made a whole film of just everyone having fun together, which would be cute. Yeah, and there's so many different versions of this film. Like the initial edit that we did had so many haymakers. And then we really kind of changed it quite a lot, because there's so many, like, there's in all of the interviews, there's so many haymakers, there's so many personal stories, there's so many, like, there's so much history, there's so much of like so many different kinds of stories that like to kind of that like have a lot of commonality, but also have so much specificity that was sometimes like hard to figure out which like, you know, like that's an amazing 10-minute story. Like this really has to go in the film, but yeah, sometimes you have to make some hard choices, but yeah. I think, I guess like a big part of it is sometimes it's like finding this like commonality in like this, like there's like a, you know, there's like a, it's kind of structured, you know, in the same way that like the workshops and the, you know, the forums and like the like all of that was structured, and there is like sometimes it's like these like logical flows between things, but sometimes there's really just like kind of flows of feeling, and I think that comes up quite a lot in the like in the ways that like a few different people talk about pedagogy and like reaching students and like making them, I think like Emalani talks about feeling the Pacific, and like I guess that was like a big part of like, I guess knowing which way to go with it, which is yeah, just like kind of going with the feeling and going with like yeah, just trying to find that feeling and the like and the flow of that.
Yeah.
Akil, can I just also add that one of the things that the choices that you guys made, which I think really enhanced the film and spoke to that feeling, was you managed to create an aesthetic of the film which really highlighted the feeling and the palette of this country, of this land, of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri land. There were certain choices that were made, and you'll see this on the website. We're going to talk a little bit about the website that's hosting the film and some other resources as well. But when Uncle Wally took us on this walk through the ANU campus, a campus that we've inhabited, you know, for a long time, and we walk across it all the time, it was like seeing it with new eyes, like starting to see the campus through the palette and the colors and the feel of the trees, for example, the scar trees that he took us through. And so those amazing trees, the color and the palette of those trees has come to be the wash over the whole film, over all the participants, and also the website as well, so that the land and the place and the spirits of that place and the participants are almost merged aesthetically through the kinds of decisions that were taken about the palette of the film, the color palette of the film. So I thought that was a particularly successful dimension of the film, in that even if you're just quiet, even if you just watch it without the sound, and the content is so beautiful and poetic and moving, there is a way in which you feel like you're emplaced here in this Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and so grateful for that connection. So that, I think, came through really well in the film. And I know Uncle Wally couldn't join us today, but you know, his walk through the campus really grounded us and emplaced us here so that we could speak and create those kinships and those solidarities and the sharing. So I'm just going to thank you so much, everyone. Really, really appreciate your sharing. I would like us to move to the website that's going to be hosting this film, and let us have a little bit of a look at it. Again, a lot of work went into this space, a lot of back and forth, a lot of questions, a lot of reflections, and different choices were made to put this together. Talei is responsible for all the beautiful art that you see on the website, the background art, those colors that are in the background. When you go to the first page of the website, the film automatically plays, so you can sort of see the full, the whole screen is covered, the top part of the screen is covered with the film. We do need to update the link for the most current version of the film, but at the moment it's running a previous version of it because we had to do some last minute edits. But you see the wonderful Simone, and then there's a bit of an overview of the film and why we made it, what it's about. So we do encourage you to explore that, because it's a first step in terms of hosting and sharing some of the issues that were raised in this film. There is also a survey that we invite people to take as part of your feedback on the film. And I'm just going to let one of our team members, Bianca, speak a little bit more to that.
Hi, I'm here again, Bianca Hennessey speaking. Yeah, we put together a survey to get to know the people who have viewed this film a little better. our intention with this project was always for it to be an ongoing conversation. So we don't want to just make a film and then send it out into the world and not be able to hear from you. So when you click on survey at the top or go to the website that's showing now, you'll see a link to a Google form, and that's a place where you can answer some or all of the questions, however many you have time for. There's a lot there. It's because we're so curious. It's designed to be answered after you watch the film. And we would love for you to tell us what you think and tell us a bit about your experiences. And we'll use those answers going forward to see how we can evolve this project next year and into the future. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bianca. Yep. So our survey is kind of a first step to getting feedback, gathering information, thinking about how we can improve our project, improve or transform any aspects of our project and make them more meaningful to, you know, anyone who's interested in this space and working in the decolonial space within the Academy, but also we know that some of this will be quite relevant to people beyond the Academy in other institutional spaces. So if you click on people, on the About page, it just gives you a bit more information about the website, the rationale, the context in which we're working. And then if you go to the people page, then you can see all the lovely faces of all the wonderful people who were involved in the organizational side, on the website, and also the participants in the film. And I encourage you to learn a little bit more about all our wonderful participants. So that is our people page. And then there are quite a few resources, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you just go to the resources page, you'll see another link to the film, a link to some educational resources, guiding questions that you can use in classrooms or workplaces in order to start conversations about any of the issues that were raised in the film. Maybe, Morgan, we could click on the discussion guide down the bottom under education. So here are some examples of the kinds of prompts and questions that we've put together. Some other resources about curriculum and syllabus. There's a whole range of things that we've tried to put together by way of a starting point for not just viewing the film, but taking the film further in your classrooms or in your research, in thinking about methodologies, in thinking about building trans-Indigenous and non-Indigenous solidarities and building the network of allies, so on and so forth. So those are all part of our education and other resources. And then finally, we have a dialogue page, which I'm going to ask our current dialogue editor to talk a little bit about. And that's Trish.
Hi, everyone. So this is the dialogue page, kind of like a blog, but we've decided not to go with the word blog. But yeah, I guess the point of this is to continue the conversation of the film. Does an excellent job, but wanting to continue to talk about how to decolonize the Academy, and especially hearing from BIPOC students on that as well. So our first post, which is already live, is from our original organizing committee, and it's kind of asking them to reflect on what it was like to organize the original workshop. And I recommend reading it because it's nice to hear from their perspective, which is obviously quite different from people that came as a participant. So that's the first blog there. And then later on this month, we are going to have a video podcast with Catherine Achikoso, who is from the University of Hawaii, and Amanda Sullivan-Lee from De Anza College in California, talking about what it's been like to teach on the Black Pacific during this current momentum of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we'll also have a conversation with Maeve, who was in the film that you just saw. And then in December, we're hoping to have a piece on decolonial research and praxis in the academy and the arts. So please check it out. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Trish, and for all your work on the current dialogue and the upcoming ones as well. And again, we're hoping these will be resources and conversation starters for people to take forward in their work, in their teaching, wherever you see it being relevant. And we also invite people to give us suggestions about things that we've missed, things that are not included, things that we've forgotten to include. Trying to edit the website in 2020 was like a serious challenge of focus because we had so many other things going on just in, you know, COVID lockdown situation. So I'm so grateful to Morgan and Sarah and Saltwater People who were contracted to do the website, what they managed to put together, and also our team of Trish and Janelle and Bianca and our ANU team who consistently worked on this, even while juggling an increased workload. So that's our website and that's our film. And again, we welcome any feedback. And now I'd like to open it up to Q&A. And we'll keep my eye on the chat for any questions that either I or any of our participants here might want to speak to. Okay, so a question to kick us off. What do you think is the impact of producing a film rather than a more conventional academic output? What kinds of knowledges or points of view emerge from such a form? So I'll speak briefly to this, but then also, I don't know if Ali or Nat or Emalani have any thoughts about this. Also because Ali and Natalie are part of a visual arts collective. They work in all kinds of different formats and forms of knowledge. So it's relevant for them as well. But I deliberately decided to do a film rather than some other conventional output because I'm very mindful of the dominance of text and of writing in the academy and the way we all just naturally accept that as the dominant form of knowledge production that we all need to subscribe to and also become masters in. And many of many Indigenous peoples do. They absolutely are brilliant at writing and that form of literacy that comes with reading and writing. Alice has an amazing project kind of historically tracking that and looking at the contributions that Pacific and other Indigenous peoples have made to the space of reading and writing. So whatever discipline we're in, we're trained to do that and to do that well, but it does marginalize other forms of knowledge that are outside of that. So I selected a film because if you're in a filmmaking school, you're expected to do a film. But if you're in the humanities and social sciences, you know, if you're in anthropology or sociology or history, you're supposed to conform to one dominant kind of knowledge production. And it is disruptive to select to do an output of a different genre in those disciplines. So just the very choice of selecting what they call here a non-traditional output is a critical and decolonial choice. But it then also speaks to the kinds of knowledge forms that our people have been more comfortable with across time and space, but forms that are more visual, forms that are more embodied, forms that are more poetic, the ways in which we've managed to archive knowledge over hundreds and sometimes thousands of years through our bodies and our voices, through oral formats. So often that's captured way more better in film than it is in text. Not always, but I believe it is. And because I work across different forms, it made a lot of sense to me. Ali and Nat, does that resonate with you as well?
Yeah, it does. I think the ideas of accessibility are really vital always in universities. And, you know, just in terms of who's accessing the space and the knowledge and how that knowledge is exclusionary in its form, we constantly are talking about that. And I think to make different kinds of work, but also bring ideas into forms other than journals and books is a really important responsibility. And it just so happens now we're all in this digital, we're in this digital place together, which is, you almost feel so saturated you can't. Yeah, you forget the digitization of everything has become so profound. So I think there's a lot to think through with that. And it's a lot of people are visually very literate in terms of knowing what they want to see, but the back end of making it, I just want to acknowledge everyone that's put all this work into the incredible website, the incredible film, and how hard it is to troll through that many hours of footage, Akil and Talei, and, you know, edit something so fantastic. So well done, everyone. The generosity and love is very much in the virtual room here. So, yeah.
I think too, all of us are engaged with creative arts praxis. So we're practitioners and we teach in that, you know, that traditional, so-called traditional way of teaching through that scholarship and those articles, etc. But what we've found certainly is with the Unbound Collective, and we talk about this a lot with our students and with our colleagues as well, is that we feel like we're actually better educators through the creative arts and through being able to collaborate and create new creative work as a literary, poetic, cinematic tool to disrupt and decolonize in ways that we just otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So I think it's the use of affect, and Emalani, you spoke about this in the film as well, that use of emotion. You know, if you haven't moved students and shifted them emotionally, it's not about the head, it's about the heart and the gut. And that's affect, that's our embodied response. That's what we live with all the time. And I think the creative arts for us is the way that, and we talked about this a lot when we came together as a group, it is the most effective way to be able to deal with it all. And as we've all said, carry the load a bit more lightly through acts of beauty and, you know, that kind of generosity through the creative arts that we do. It's very beautiful work, but it's also really hard hitting. And it's a great way to teach difficult topics, you know.
Exactly. Emalani?
Yeah, I'll just add that I think when it comes to your kind of standard academic publications, I mean, we all write them and we publish, but I think these kinds of publications have traditionally talked about us as Indigenous people and not with us. And even though many of us are working in that space to change the way academic work is written, to challenge how we engage with other academics in publishing written works, I think it's still kind of a hostile space. And especially when I think about the communities that I write for, they're not reading those works. They're not reading journal articles. They're not looking in academic publications. They want to read the blogs. They want to see the creative pieces. They want to watch the films. They want to feel it. And as much as I try to put feeling and get feeling into my academic works, it's not always accessible that way. And so just as an academic, I always try to make sure personally that I am producing things that can do what I can't do in an academic article. And whether that's, I'm not a film person, but whether that's contributing to films or writing poetry or creating spaces where we can express ourselves critically and creatively, I think that's really important. So yeah, I was happy to be a part of have a film project that challenges and creates at the same time. So,
Emalani, I wonder if you could share a link to your blog as well, because I think you do some of this wonderful work through your blog, combining the creative and the critical and the intellectual together. That would be brilliant if you could share. We have another question from Wilhelmina. And it says, as a non-Indigenous academic and person, I'm really keen to learn about how I can learn more and work with amazing people at Charles Sturt University. Are there opportunities for inter-organization cooperation in research that can help us learn more and work together? I think for us, this was very much a start for bringing different institutions and different universities together, maybe universities that don't always collaborate. So for me, for example, working with the amazing scholars from Flinders was like a gift. It was like an absolute eye-opener because ANU often operates in certain kinds of spaces, in Australia. There's certain kinds of groupings of universities. So there was that was a start there. But I think collaboration and cooperation is very much at the heart of this project. And I would say that through our website, we're trying to reach out and bring those who are keen and interested and passionate about this space together in that format. And then unfortunately, like everything else, it's then dependent on future funding and grants and ongoing institutional support in order to have more formal ties and formal connections to make those. So I'm doing some ongoing work with Ali and Nat and the Unbound Collective, trying to build future projects, for example. But does anyone else want to speak to that question about making connections and with non-Indigenous academics and opportunities for cooperation?
Am I unmuted? Yeah. I think the bottom line for, I don't know, just a tip, and it's true for anybody, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, is just relationships and relationality, and developing very, the conversations we have between each other are different. And that's something that really came up in that forum. And it's been, we don't have enough opportunities as Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, Indigenous scholars coming together and just having these networks and creating these networks. It's a very unique opportunity, and the conversations that we have, it's like the devoid of the colonial filter, and it's a different conversation. But we have these conversations as well, and we have these networks with our non-Aboriginal colleagues and friends, and it's about relationships, always about relationship building. So it can't just be that intellectual, I don't know what else to say really, but building relationships, personally reaching out to people who you are, I don't know, your scholarship is aligned with, and stuff like that.
I totally agree, Nat. And I would say, like, for many people, sometimes they might think about looking beyond their own institutions or beyond their departments and programs as a first step, when actually you have to get your politics, you have to get your solidarity, you have to get your building of alliances and decolonial work right in your own space and in your own institution and with your own colleagues first and foremost, because sometimes it seems like the answer is like over there, or the way through is outside, when in fact, you're on the right path if you can get your relationships strong and solid at home, on home ground first. And the other thing I would say is that any act of educating others about decolonial issues is labor. It's labor for any Indigenous person who's asked to share, to educate, to help people understand. Now, of course, we do that every day in our teaching. We do that through our research and our writing and our dissemination. But I know my inbox is chock-a-block full of people all over the world asking me to add value and to add an Indigenous voice to their space. And it's work. It can be quite exhausting. It's also an honor, but it's also exhausting. So when we try to reach out and connect and work with others, sometimes the energy flow is not always of an equal or balanced nature. And this is why well-being became such an important part of our conversation during the workshops and during the forum, because we suddenly realized in order to make positive change, in order to keep the focus on self-determination and sovereignty and healing and justice, we also needed to be grounded, balanced, be able to speak and stand from a place that was supported, you know, personally from within our families and with our colleagues as well. So there's a lot of different kinds of work that goes into building a strong decolonial or decolonized space. I'm just conscious of time, and there are a couple more questions. So I'm just gonna, sorry, so I've got 3 in the feed at the moment. I don't know, Emalani, if you have thoughts about this, but there is a question about the dominance of the Anglophone Pacific and about how we can build some of these relationships beyond the Anglophone space, which, you know, because there are Francophone, there's a whole Hispanophone parts of the Pacific, and often we work within those dominant colonial languages, so English, French, and Spanish. There's also a whole part of the Pacific that spoke or generations that spoke Japanese. So any thoughts about building solidarities across those boundaries?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, and it's something that I struggle with as someone who teaches Pacific studies and is very aware of the fact that the majority of what I teach comes from and speaks about and speaks to the Anglophone Pacific. And that's a consequence of colonialism. I can't speak French. You know, I don't speak Spanish. It was awesome to have Futuru as part of our group, because he comes from, you know, a Chinese speaking part of the Pacific. And so I think, yeah, it's about finding ways. It's about finding first, I think, those special people who can cross those boundaries, those linguistic barriers. I have a PhD student right now from New Caledonia who is trilingual. She's New Caledonian, from New Caledonia of Tahitian descent, speaks Tahitian, French, and English, and she's just this amazing gem because she helps me to cross those boundaries. Another thing, though, I think which would be amazing is if we could, and again, this is another consequence of colonialism, that many of us don't grow up speaking our own Indigenous languages, but at least in the sub-region of the Pacific of Polynesia, where our languages are semi-similar, digging into our Indigenous languages might also provide us opportunities to reconnect with one another. And I say this fully aware of the fact that that might be the case for Polynesia, not at all a case for Micronesia or Melanesia, where the linguistic diversity is immense. But there might be some opportunities in parts of the Pacific to reconnect by exploring our Indigenous languages. Other than that, it is finding those people who are knowledgeable or can speak multiple colonial languages, and in our spare time, hopefully learning another one, which, yeah.
Absolutely. Your response reminded me of the Festival of Pacific Arts and the ways in which everyone's speaking all these different languages, but through art is able to exchange and share things. And language matters, but it matters in a really different way when you're able to do it through your body, through your material culture, through, you know, tattooing or voyaging canoes and all of those amazing, you know, other amazing things that Indigenous people in Oceania do. So I think our discussion just there answers the next question, which came about whether or not colonial languages and differences in institutions are separating Oceanian peoples. Definitely all manner of colonial borders and boundaries separate. And then it's often up to us to cross those boundaries and reconnect, the history of the Pacific and also with the continent of Australia is one of kinship and one of sharing and one of people moving and flowing, via the ocean to these different parts of the Pacific, of which this country is very much a part of as well. So yes, I know in Pacific studies and Indigenous studies, we are very mindful of having to constantly cross those barriers that have been erected through colonialism. Sorry, I'm just going through other final questions. Okay, there are a lot of wonderful thank yous. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to filter through for, okay. So Lisa, one of our wonderful participants, Lisa, who is joining us, she has said, given this is about trans-Indigenous solidarity within academia and beyond, as an Indigenous woman, I'm concerned about how the Academy and institutions can make fellow Indigenous colleagues behave under colonial structures. How do you deal with or continue to work in these spaces when there's internalized racism, gender biased experience from our own colleagues and networks? Can this be explored at a later date for the decolonial possibilities dialogue? That is an awesome question, Lisa, because it's very much, when we're talking about trans-Indigenous spaces, it's not like there's like good guys and bad guys. It's not like this this perfect like border between the Indigenous and the non-Indigenous, not at all. We all know from working within institutions about the level of competition, about the level of strategizing, about all kinds of things that people have to work through in order to survive within the academy. And sometimes there are challenges that descend along race, gender, sexuality, all kinds of lines within the academy that we have to navigate. So there is not an automatic building of Indigenous or trans-Indigenous solidarity like anything else. It still is work, and it requires people to reach out and talk to each other and connect. It's a really, really important question, and it might have to be our final question because we're almost out of time, and I know some of our panelists need to go on to other events, but I wondered if any of you had any thoughts about that, because when we use the term trans-Indigenous, it kind of implies like, oh yes, we can like just connect across these Indigenous boundaries, but for those of us from the Pacific, we know that that is not straightforward. So I'd love to have any of your final thoughts on that, Ali and Nat and Emalani.
I agree with you, Lisa. I ask myself that question all the time. And I think the students and my dear colleagues and the other Aboriginal people and Indigenous peoples inside institutions which are fragmented and they're not whole places. And I'm just reflecting on Katerina's kind of work talking about that kind of displacement and fragmentation of knowledge and how you remain whole in that, but also offer offer love and decolonizing love or critical analysis to students who haven't had it offered in the same kind of way. And it is, but particularly for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students and other Indigenous students at our university, they keep me, I feel honoured to teach. It's such a, you have no right when you are representing our ancestors and our future to be cynical in that space. So as much as you feel frustrated by the institutional disciplining that's going on continually and fighting that you have to do to maintain our old people's voices in that space and to honour these knowledges, because if you can't honour them, you actually can do damage. You can teach history and actually make things worse for your community, and you're constantly aware of that. You're constantly aware that if you don't do the right job, you could actually do more damage, because people go out there thinking they know, they're qualified knowers. So, and there's never enough of us in the space. So it's such an honour to be able to gather together. It was precious. And I can just see that, it was like air, breathing air, and hearing Simone sing about the wind connects us and the ocean connects us and the earth connects us. And obviously the internet is connecting us. Other ways that we're connected as well, Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Nat or Emalani, any final thoughts?
Emalani? Oh, no, thank you again. I was just sitting here actually rereading Lisa's question, and first, I think it's an excellent question, definitely should be explored further. But I've also been thinking just about my own use of the term Indigenous and how I often use it really generally. And in thinking about the potential, kind of internalized bias, internalized racism, even that can happen amongst Indigenous peoples, sometimes I have to take a couple of steps back and realize that even in my use of the term Indigenous, and often how I apply it to kind of as a blanket term across the Pacific, that in itself can come with negativity, that not everybody wants to be identified as Indigenous, in other words, because indigeneity comes with these connotations of being displaced, of being marginalized, of being suppressed. I mean, there are all these people in the Pacific that would take offense to being even called that. So I'm just sort of reflecting on the things that I've said earlier, recognizing that I have to, even in wanting to empower Indigenous people, because I experience myself as one, that I also have to allow for and provide space for the diversity of ways that people experience themselves as First Peoples in the Pacific, whether they, and that they might not even use that term, and that in itself can be a kind of violence against these people who don't want to use that word. So, yeah, I was just reading Lisa's question, kind of self-reflecting on how even I have my own ways of speaking for people that I have to be aware of when I use terms like Indigenous or even other terms. So I don't know if sorry, that wasn't sort of a reflection on everything else, but I think that's the nature of the things that we do. And it's so amazing to have these kinds of spaces to reflect, but also to critically reflect on ourselves so that we can move forward in empowered and empowering ways. So thanks for the prompt, Lisa. I'm thinking further.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Lisa was such a wonderful contributor to our workshops and to our film. So we appreciate, she always asks the strong critical questions too. And, coming from the Pacific, where there's Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, and then there's Aboriginal, Torres Strait, South Sea Islander, there are so many different kinds of groupings with different histories, and both similarities and differences in our experiences. We do have to be mindful of those differences, as well as the terms on which we can build kinship and connection, and just be respectful, of all of those differences. But also, for me as a Pacific person, first and foremost, showing that respect to the people and the spirits of the land here, on which we live and work and are gathered, because if we can connect to them, then we can do better work with everyone else. But if we are not grounded, connected, and respectful and have permission to do what we do here, then it's just not gonna work in the same way. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. I know we could talk and talanoa and have dialogue and discussions for much longer, because there's so much more to talk about. But as we said before, and as Simon signaled at the beginning, this is just a start. This is just the beginning of our journey. We put this out hoping to make a little bit of a difference and prompt conversations. So please take this wonderful film, you know, that Akil and Talei and everyone else has put together. It's also going to be shown as part of the Pacifica Film Festival, so keep an eye out for that. But it is free and accessible to all. So, you know, there are no commercial dimensions of this. We just want it to be something that can make a small contribution to the ongoing decolonization, decolonial work that I know many of you are involved in. So it's a humbling experience to do this with everyone in this Zoom. Normally we say in this room, but in this Zoom. And we're so appreciative of your time in a busy and challenging week and year, and sending much loloma to everyone for all the work that you do, and hopefully somehow we can meet in person in the future. But thank you so much to our participants. Thank you so much to the team behind the scenes, to Bianca and Janelle and Sarah and Morgan, Akil, Talei, Trish, Ali, Nat, Emalani, and all our other participants who joined us through the Zoom chat function. Lisa, Alice, a few of you were there. Woohoo! Thank you, everyone. Huge vinaka vakalevu, kampasin rapa, and go forth into your weekend with blessings. Thank you.